I'm going to hand out one of these to each of you guys here. Just a little, just stuff that I've collected a little bit over the years together about small groups. And I want to tell you guys that I've been part of small groups ever since I came back to God, really, in my own life when I was 24 years old. And a small group was really the thing that changed my life, because it was like the worst year of my life. I was in my third year of law school, just broken up with my girlfriend, not sure what to do, starting to come back to God, and my dad suggested I go to church here in LA, which was Norwalk Church, and I started going there, and I became part of a small group, and I think I was like 24 years old. The next youngest person in that group was about 35, 36, so it wasn't a group of people who were just my age. But they loved me, they really did. They were so kind and gracious and prayerful and just with me, and it changed my entire journey with God, that 1 year of being a part of that small group. And it made me understand and helped me realize what was possible in a small group community. And from that moment on, I became a fan. And within a year, I had started leading my own young adult small group, and we started doing that. And I've been leading small groups on a weekly basis ever since. And so for the last 24 years, I've been leading at least one small group a week. Right now, I'm leading 2. And really, almost a third one, if you will. We don't really count our soccer as a small group, but it is in a way. And I'll tell you about why it is in a way in a few minutes. Because at the place, we've been having what we call adventure groups, which are kind of a specialized form of small groups, which are intended to be able to reach out to people who you don't know. Because traditional small groups, while we have them and we love them, at the place, they're not very evangelistic. And if you try and make them evangelistic, you'll be very sad in your small group. Okay, they occasionally become evangelistic, but if that's the purpose of them, they will not work. Okay, because there's only one thing that can be a purpose of a small group. This is going to tell me how much you know about it. There's only one thing that can be a purpose of a small group meeting time or a small group that comes together. What is that? No.
One thing that should be, or one thing that it is?
One thing that should be. Yeah. The one thing that is the goal of any small group is to meet Jesus there in that group. Okay. And because the problem with small groups is that if they're not done well, every single person has their own agenda. They have their own reason for coming and their own reason for being there, and leaders often have their own agendas also. And the purpose of a small group is to meet Jesus. It's why they exist. And so the next question I want to ask you guys, though, the first question really has to do with why? Why should we even bother with small groups? Because a lot of churches have tried small groups. There are lots of them, okay? And most of them do not do them very well. But yet there are some churches that do them amazingly well. In fact, almost without exception, all the largest churches in the world are churches composed of small groups. Okay? Almost all of them. 9 of the 10 largest churches in the world are small group churches, or churches with small groups. Because the only way that you can get a big church is if you have small groups. I mean, it's impossible to get just huge churches without some form of community otherwise, if you don't have some form of small group community. So here's the question, why small groups? What do you think? If I ask you this question, why should you have small groups in a church community? Why? And there's really one answer. There's a lot of different ideas, but there's one real answer. But tell me your thoughts. Why do you think you should have small groups, or could have small groups, or would have small groups?
It's more personal. People open up.
Okay, very good. Okay, what? It's more personal. Okay, what else?
Form better relationships with other church members.
Form better relationships with other church members. Absolutely. Okay, what else?
Greater sense of accountability.
Absolutely. You have serious accountability in a small group that is not present in churches. Okay. Support. Absolutely. I always joke, I always laugh, because if people at church, if they move, when they're moving, if they're in a small group, they don't call me. Because their small group will help them move. If they're not in a small group, they will call me. Because they need help moving. They need someone to help them do the stuff, do the practical part of daily life. And so that's why I want everyone to be in a small group, because I really hate moving. But I say that with seriousness, because I've told pastors this and done a lot of training for pastors over the years, and I tell them, look, if you have a church member in a small group, you no longer have to pastor that person. Okay? You don't. They are already receiving pastoral care within that small group community if it's an effective small group community. And that doesn't mean that they don't want me to pastor them. It just means that I don't need to worry about that person, because if something is going on in their life, guess what? I'll know if I need to know, because one of the small group members will tell me, or the small group will take care of them, in which case, okay. Mike.
Well, when I came back to the church in '96, one of the things that within 3, 4, 5, 6 months, I don't remember exactly, I started going to a Wednesday night small group at a member's home. And I did that probably regularly for 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's how I got to know people.
Absolutely.
Part of the church.
Absolutely. And that's why part of the reason I work so hard to try and get people to join small groups, because if they are connected to a small group, they're never leaving the church. They might move, but they're not going to leave the church because they're already connected. And you know that you've probably heard the statistics endless times, but if you have 6 friends in a church, people don't leave. 6, that's not very many. Okay, 6. If you're connected to 6 people in a church, and guess how many people there are in small groups? More than that. Okay? And so if you're in that small group community and you have friendships in those small group communities, then we stay connected. Okay? Yes, go for it.
Maybe you're going to cover it, but let me ask the question again. Go over it sometimes, why evangelist is not the purpose of the small group. I want to
Okay. I'll give it to you in one moment, because the purpose of a small group is to meet Jesus.
Okay.
And so that's the problem, because if my agenda is to be evangelistic, unless my small group is formed with the purpose of evangelism, which is okay, that would be a specific purpose of a small group, then that would be okay. Because then the small group, all these people are coming together for one specific purpose. Okay, and you can have small groups that are purposed, okay, which is okay to do. But the fact is that in most small groups that want to be evangelistic, you've got 1 or 2 people, because in any given group of people, you've got about 10% of people who are gifted with the gift of evangelism. And those people want everyone else to think like they do. And the other 90% of them are going, that's not me. I don't think that way. Why are you making me do this? But yet they feel guilty because they're not doing it. See the problem? It starts to come in. Okay, and so if you've got a group of like-minded people who are purposed together and say, we want to have a small group that's focused on being evangelistic in our community, that's great. And that's part of the reason that we at the place have done what we call adventure groups, because adventure groups are intended to be not really evangelistic, but reaching outside of themselves. Now, just because I mentioned it a couple of times, I just want to tell you this idea of an adventure group. It really, it's been around for about 15 years. An adventure group is simply a small group that is focused on a common interest. It's not what you would think of as a regular small group. At the place we've had, well, Layla ran a small group. Why don't you tell them, Layla? Come up here now. It's as good a time as any. You tell them spend 5 minutes and tell them about the adventure group that you were running.
Okay. I took a class with Simon many years ago. At the end of the class, he kind of challenged us to start a small group, doing something in the community that you liked it or were passionate about it. So immediately I knew what I wanted to do, something with autism. For 2 reasons. Because having a child with autism, I knew that I could connect with other parents immediately. And also because I have been blessed by many parents in my life, and I want to give back. So I started hosting a support group for parents with kids with autism, and we stopped meeting last summer because I thought I was moving, but I did for 7 years, and we would meet once a month. Another thing for me that was very important was to provide free child care, because I knew when my kids were young how hard it was to find someone that would be willing to watch a child with special needs, and also the financial, having to pay. So I found a therapist who volunteered for 5 years to come to every single meeting and help with child care. And after she was not able anymore, my own kids were old enough and they started coming and doing, the child care, and it became like a family affair. I can tell you how many parents I met and how many new friendships I developed. But I gotta confess, of all the parents that I tried to help, I think I was the one who was helped the most. Because when you share your experience with others, and when you tell others what God has done for you, something changes in you, and you're constantly reminded of His love and His mercy, and he's not something only written in the Bible, but he's someone real next to you that is doing the same kind of miracles in your life every day. So when you're sharing that with other parents, you feel with hope. And I created, a group of friends that anywhere that I go now, I run into someone. Oh, I was in your at Target, at Trader Joe's. But it's just being out there. If God gives you a talent, or even if it's a trial, anything in your life comes for a reason. And when you share with others, you're nothing but blessed. So.
And really, the idea of an adventure group is simply to invite people to come and do something you already want to do. This is actually why I started the kids soccer thing that we have on Sunday mornings there at NPAA, because my kids wanted to play soccer. There's all the Saturday soccer leagues, so I'm like, I can do a soccer league on Sunday. And so we've been doing that for about the past 5 years, I think. We do it at least twice a year. Some years we've done it 3 times, 3 series a year, and just invite people to come. And every time we have between 50 and 60 kids, and we met a lot of parents, during that course of time. We've had quite a few people who've started coming to church over the course of years, but just by getting connected with their kids. That's an example of what we call an adventure group. It has nothing to do with this. It's not a small group Bible study in any specific way. It's just doing something. In fact, some people at church just started a new one a couple of weeks ago doing mountain biking. Again, we call this an adventure group because it's just something you already want to do, but we invite people to do one specific thing in that group that's a spiritual thing. It can either just be a prayer. We did indoor soccer at this school for like 8 years. There has never been anything that I have ever done that's had more non-Christians come than that indoor soccer. We had all these kids from Moore Park College and from Channel Islands College who come play soccer, and one of them just emailed me last week, and we're going to start again. We haven't done it for a year, partly for all the stuff that's happened in the gym there at NPAA. But we either have a prayer or a testimony, or you can have a Bible study. That's part of it. And most of the groups are either have a prayer time or a testimony time, just something just so that people know. And when you're getting together with a bunch of college kids, most of them who are not really thinking about God, but every time they all come in the big center in the circle, we all pray together, and then we play soccer together. I mean, it's fun. It really is. And so that's a specific group. There's a great book on it that I've used. It's called, what is it called? Fly Fishing, Dog Walking, and Sharing Christ in the 21st Century. Okay? And it comes from the story of Ted Haggard, who's a disgraced pastor now, but man, had a booming church there in Colorado. And the reason he developed this adventure group model there in his church. And this woman who was dog walking, her group was dog walking. In his church, she had over 1,000 people baptized as a result of her dog walking ministry. Okay, that's a lot of people. That is a lot of people. Because, again, I don't know, I have 2 dogs. And I know every single person in my community who has dogs because we walk them every day. You're out there. And if you live in an apartment, you really know a lot of people. Because if you live in an apartment and have to walk your dog, I mean, there's a lot of people. There are a lot of people. And it's just simply being intentional about inviting people to come and do something on a regular basis that has a spiritual component, and believing that God is there going to be in this process of developing life together, okay, with them. So really at the place we do 2 different kinds of small groups. One is a more traditional small group based on Bible study as the kind of the focus, and the other one is what we call the adventure groups, which are really intended to be reaching out to people who are not simply part of the community, just based on common interest stuff and whatever you're interested in doing. One of the weekly groups that I lead and a part of is what we call Journey. On Wednesday nights it's for dads and kids. We come together at Pepper Tree Park and we play. I mean, we play hide and go seek, we play capture the flag, we play kickball, we play all these things, and at the end we have about 15-20 minutes of worship time together with the kids, and it's been fun. And you get to meet a lot of people because you go to the same park every week, and you're in that same space, and just trying to do it. You ever have your hand raised, or you just?
Yeah, just want to make a comment. We've gotten to all these small groups, and we've been trying to learn how to conduct one through Cliff Janson's book.
Yes.
And it was very challenging, to say the least, to start a small group in the community in Glendale area.
Yeah.
We were able to start one and met for maybe 4 or 5 times, and then got down.
Yeah.
And then we started another group, we talked to another couple, and they came in, but they have a different agenda. They have their own agenda.
Yeah.
And so we met for a while. We met once and then they invited them again. Then we talked to another couple. We invited them for lunch, and they said, "Yeah, we'll come." And then they canceled at the last minute. And so, we were thinking that, maybe we're not doing it right. We don't know how to start one. But initially, what we did was that at the initial meeting, we talked about, okay, the reason why we're doing this is, some of the things that we just talked about, knowing Jesus, knowing to know each other more, and creating an atmosphere where, we are free to just share, what is in our hearts. But,
They're not easy to start.
it's so
They're not easy to start. And you want to know why they're not easy to start? It's the answer to the question that I still never got answered because I got sidetracked, which is why do we do small groups? Why do we do small groups?
Well, like I said, some people came in with their own agenda.
See, the thing is, in the New Testament, there's, I think, 52 one another verses in the New Testament. You can think of some of the most famous ones. Love one another, forgive one another, do good to one another, encourage one another, pray for one another, build up one another.
We're all one accord.
All these verses, and I want to tell you, it's impossible to do in a church. Okay, it's not possible. Because you can't have that many friendships in a church. It won't work. I mean, you're going to exhaust yourself if you've ever tried to be friends with 200 people. I mean, really friends. You can't do it with 20 people. Really, the most people you can do it is about 12. And guess how many people Jesus had with him? Right? Because you cannot live in one another relationships with a huge group of people. It's not possible. I can't care. I mean, I'm a pastor, I get paid to worry about other people, and there's a limited number of people that I can take care of, and really have effective relationships with. Okay? And so if you want to be able to live biblically, you have to be living in a small group community. I'll tell you, there's no other way. It's not possible. You cannot live loving one another, praying for one another, building up one another, caring for one another, edifying one another. You cannot live that way in the church. It's not possible. If you try, you will burn yourself out. Okay? It's not possible to do that. There is too many relationships. The only way you can actually live in that form of biblical community, the kind of community that the Bible says it calls us to live in that, is really in a small group community. And that's why the biggest churches in the world have a small group community, because they know that you cannot possibly have, really, there's 15,000 people in your church. How many of them are you really going to get to know? But if you know 6 of them, you'll stay. Okay? If you know 6 of them, you'll stay. But if you don't know 6 of them, you won't stay over the course of time. And so because the evil one knows that it's so difficult, he knows that the only way you can really live in a community is in a small group community. That is why they're so hard to start. There is serious spiritual warfare in starting small groups. It is a spiritual battle to start them, because once they are started, you are now living in spiritual community.
If small group is such an important part of the church, why is it not being promoted?
Because they're hard. They take work. They're hard to do. They really take commitment. They really do. You have got to work at them to make them work. I mean, you see here, this is our small group principles. Okay, this is our list at the place. This is from a book that by Nelson Searcy called Activate. Okay, when we read this book a couple of years ago, we were like, this is exactly what we've been trying to do. And but rather than trying to rewrite his book, we just use his book for the principles and rewrite them a little bit for us at the place, trying to use these things. But here's the ideas, okay? And you can see them there on this first page here when it's called Small Group Principles. Number 1, think from the inside out, not from the outside in. This is exactly what we're talking about. If you want effective small groups, you think about who is in the church, not as who is outside the church. Who is in the church that needs to be in community, all right? Think larger, not smaller. A lot of times people will tell you they should have a small group. The fact is, if you have a small group, people are self-conscious. The bigger your small group is, the more likely it is to be an effective small group. In our small group, the one I lead in Camarillo on Friday nights with families, we have about 10 families. When they're all there, there's more than 40 people there. Okay, that is really not a small group. Most of the time, they're not all there because you know how busy your life is, all right, and whether you'd be there every time. but it's a lot of people. But when there's 40 people in your small group, people are not worried about being self-conscious. They'll come to your group because it's not about me. If I don't come, they don't feel the pressure of, oh, you didn't come. You weren't here. We couldn't have a small group. You weren't here. That's a lot of pressure for people. They do not like that. We want to make them as easy as possible. And the easiest way is to have them bigger, not smaller. Okay? Because the bigger they are, the less people feel like it's on them in order to be there. Okay? People do not like that. Now, some people do. And those are people we call leaders. Okay? Then, go ahead.
Say bigger, how big?
How big? As many people as you can fit in a room and still be okay in the room.
Depends on the size of the room.
Yeah. I mean, we meet at Jay and Christy Lee's house. They have a big house. They could fit about 35 people in that circle. And it's not a problem. And about half of them are kids. And those kids are really involved in that small group. Really. And so, I mean, they're really answering well and questions. I mean, Jennifer back there has been running her small group for a long time too with Layla and his family. So. And it's better when there's more people, right? It's better when Randall's been leading our young adult and collegiate small groups. Randall.
Yeah, I was just going to say that principle like really applies when it comes to young people, like young adults, collegiates, youth and stuff, because the text I get all the time and I'm saying, hey, we're having a small group.
Who's else is coming? Who's coming?
And it's like, oh, I know there's going to be 5 people, then I can't tell them like, yeah, no, it'll be great, because they're like, they don't know anyone's coming.
Right.
But if I know there's going to be 15, 20 people.
Right. You have no fear of inviting people when you know there's going to be a good group. But when you know, are you going to invite a new person when you think there might be 2 or 3 people there? You're afraid to invite them. You don't want them to come. Because if they come, you might be embarrassed. Well, I don't know where everyone is. I mean, seriously, you worry about that. That's our psyches. We worry about that. When we know there's going to be a good group of people there, you're like, come and join the party. Come and have fun. We're all going to be there together. Okay? Think friends, not intimacy. This is another one. Small groups are for friendships. A lot of times, small groups have tried to force intimacy on people. If you come to our small group, we're going to be best friends. No, that is not your agenda. Okay? It is an opportunity for intimacy. If you come, you might connect with another person, but you might not be best friends with another person. If you're trying to have your agenda being intimacy, it's trouble. Okay? It's trouble. Okay? Think short term, not long term. Again, people are worried about their length of commitment. At the place we ask, we do 2 a year. And then during the summer, we just concentrate on adventure groups, just kind of the fun stuff, doing the camping trips and campouts and the beach stuff and all those kinds of things. But during the fall and the spring, so we invite people to sign up for 10 to 12 weeks each time, okay, to be part of a small group that has a limited time frame. It has a definite entry point and has a definite exit point. But most of the small groups continue. They keep going and going and going because the people don't want to stop them, but we want to give the opportunity for new people to come in and out in an easy way, for them to come in and to come out. Think promotion months, not ongoing sign-ups. In other words, we have specific times when people sign up, not continually throughout the year, because we want the direct entry and exit points. Okay. Think easy, not hard. All right. We want to make it as easy as possible. Here in this material, I've given you what I call the 4 W's, and you also can see the samples. For my church, each week as I'm preaching through a series, in the back there, the end, I put some of the sample outlines here. Okay, 2 of the ones that I've just done in the last few months. And I send these to my small group leaders. They don't have to use them, but if they want to, they can. Okay, they can use them. There's a lot of good small group material out there as well, but I just happen to be preaching through specific things, so it's easier for me just to write them than to have people do them. We have what we call the 4 W's in small groups: the welcome, the worship, the word, and the witness. Okay, and so this is kind of a way of thinking about how we organize them. The welcome, we talked about an icebreaker. The worship time, if you want any time of either singing or prayer time together. The word time, when you're in God's word, and the witness time, when you're thinking about what can we do as a small group, or the things to pray for, the people we can invite or look out for. Okay, and they actually they fit with the 4 different relational patterns that you have in a church. The welcome time, this is our time one to another. Okay, the worship time, this is me to God. The word time, this is God to me, and the witness time, this is us going out. Okay, so you're really thinking about those. Within the word time itself, I've got some material in there too about the types of questions that we ask. I'm really specific, and I try and train our small group leaders to ask very specific kinds of questions. We have 3 different kinds of questions that we use, and we encourage them, and that's it. You honestly can prepare for a small group in 5 minutes. Okay. Think easy, not hard. Okay. Because it's just about the type of questions that you ask. We always have one question. We begin with an icebreaker question for a simple reason. You might think, well, why? Here's why. Because it gives every person in that group an opportunity to talk and to answer a question. If I ask you your favorite kind of cereal, you don't feel bad. There's no wrong answer. Right? You have already responded and been a part of that group, and you've shared something out loud, and the group learned something about you. Okay? But you didn't have to, there's nothing personal in it. I mean, there is, but it's not deep. It's just a way of getting people to participate and to share in the group. We'll then get into a passage, and each Bible passage we approach with 3 different kinds of questions. Okay? The first question, we call them feeling questions. Okay? And so you can see here, let's just pick one of these ones. I've given up, I can't read anymore, but I haven't gone to the optometrist yet. Okay, here's Leviticus 2. We just did this one last week. Okay, in Leviticus 2, this is the third from the end page there on your sheet, on your section here. In Leviticus 2, so we have an icebreaker question, what's your favorite snack? I send that along just in case they want. Then a feeling question. How often do you have family meals together as a family or with others? Okay, a feeling question has a specific purpose. The feeling question is to invite the people to connect emotionally with the passage. It does not talk about the passage. You don't have to know anything about the passage in order to answer this question. It simply gives people a chance to think and connect emotionally with the topic that we're talking about that night. Because guess what? Small groups are all about feelings. You grow in the Word, but if you're not connected emotionally with the Bible, it is very unlikely you are going to want to apply it to your life. Okay? And in the first few years, when I was first a youth pastor at Vallejo Drive Church, I started leading young adult small groups. And those small groups grew and they grew and they grew. In those 3 years, we had 5 young adult small groups by the time I left. And they were fun. They were weekly small groups that different people were leading. But I repented of them all afterwards. Because I realized that I wasn't leading people into really putting those stuff into practice. I call it fat sheep syndrome. They were learning about the Bible and they're just getting fatter and fatter and fatter, but they weren't exercising it. And so I realized, okay, I needed to go back to the easier, where I was really focusing on making sure that whatever we're in the Bible, it's connecting with it emotionally and then making an emotional, conscious decision to be able to apply this in my life during the week. So we have 1 or 2 feeling questions, and then we have what's called the meat questions. The meat questions are very simple. They're understanding the passage, what the passage is actually talking about. I train people, train small group leaders on how to come up with these questions. There's really only 2 rules for meat questions. One is the answer has to be answerable from the passage or the context at least. Okay, so the question has to be answerable. The answer has to be found somewhere in that passage. Okay, or its context, and then the second part of that, and when answered, it has to help you understand the passage. Okay, not just simply a question about the passage. So those are the 2 things, and so I try and write questions that will, that you are especially comparing and contrasting different portions of the scripture together is the best way to have people. So I ask these questions: how does the grain offering differ from the burnt offering in Leviticus 1? How is it similar? What's the significance of these differences? Now I ask these questions in a group of where half the participants are kids. Okay, so you might think, wow, that's kind of a heavy question for 7, 8, 9-year-olds, but they're all answering these questions. It's not hard. Is the grain offering a sacrifice even though it's not killed and there's no blood? Why? We'll talk about this. Now, something else I do, if you have a big group of people, it's easiest if you're actually leading a group to break them down into smaller groups, because we have families in our small group. When we did this lesson last week, there were 6 families there. So I will ask these questions out loud, and then I'll break the group into the families, and they will answer it in their family, and then we'll come back together and answer them. The reason we do that is because when you've got 30 people around a group, you do not have time to go around the circle and have everyone answer, but I want everyone to have the opportunity to talk. So they just come down in their small group, talk, and then we come back together, and they can respond together, and so we give everyone a chance. And if you've got a big group, it's the easiest way of being able to do it, and it takes the pressure off people again. They don't feel like they're right and wrong. Okay. So that's and then the last questions are application questions. You can see some of the applications that, how can I offer God my life as a living sacrifice this week? Or What praise can I bring God with my life as a grain offering that brings a sweet aroma to God? Something along those lines. Okay.
My question would be, I don't know where to start. You've got this group and you're inviting people in, and we're going to work on the word for 10 weeks or whatever kind of thing. But if I tell people I'm studying Leviticus 2 tonight, I'm not going to have anybody show up.
Yeah, but you will. If you're preaching it through as a church, that's the thing. Is that if our church is actually going through it, so we're preaching through this series on Leviticus. Okay, and so it is easier if you're doing something as a church, as a series. It's hard to run a small group if you do not have some connection with a larger church. You can do it, but it's harder to be able. I did it for many years though at Noah, where we would just pick your passage. It doesn't have to be Leviticus. The only reason it's Leviticus is because I'm preaching through Leviticus, and so a lot of people are interested in it right now. And so kind of talking about each week. But not all the groups are doing Leviticus, and there is no pressure. They can do whatever they want in their small group. Every group is going to choose. About half the groups in our church are doing Leviticus. The other half are not. So my Journey small group is not doing. We don't do Leviticus on Wednesday nights. So yeah, I mean, it's good to pick a topic, and you can pick a topic. It doesn't have to be a biblical topic, but there's advantages to having small groups out of the Bible, and it comes from vast years of experience. Because I can tell you the number one problem with small groups. What's the number one problem with small groups? You can tell me.
There's issues where it's like people go off their own discussions, where you come in for something, but then everybody has, like you said, agenda, so they start talking about their things and their life, and you name it.
Yes. Small group leadership is an art. It is an art to be able to keep people moving in the same direction, through the course of a group time. But it also has to do with the objective. And part of it here, I talked about it here in these, almost everything is in these notes somewhere along the way. But the objective is because in the beginning of a small group, you really need to decide what it's for. What are we here for? And then most small groups in the beginning, we don't do it as much anymore, but we have covenants. That you sign a covenant saying, I'm committing to these things. And each group can edit the covenant as they like. But it's a very helpful thing in a small group to have a covenant, because then you're having the same purpose. We're going in the same direction. And there's a lot of sample covenants out there I should have attached.
Is it likely if you have 5 or 6 small groups within the church that each group will have a different purpose?
Somewhat. Yeah, most of these groups that we have at the place are Bible study fellowships. So that's their purpose. Now the adventure groups are completely different. Whatever purpose that group is tasked for is that way. So the number one problem. What's the number one problem?
Inconsistency.
Well, yeah, that's a problem too. The number one problem in most small groups is that the leader has an agenda. That's the number one problem. It's not that the people in the small group have an agenda, it's that the leader has an agenda. And the reason that I train small group leaders to ask these questions is because most small group leaders, they want to be a leader because they have something to share. And it is death for a small group.
Can you give me examples when you say they have an agenda?
They have an agenda. They want to share what they think and know about the Bible. Or they have a problem, which is even worse, right? But they want you to come and hear what they have to say. They're the expert. They know the Bible better than you. They're going to tell you. That's why you'll notice every single one of those things on that list is a question. The job of a small group leader is a facilitator. Okay? They are a facilitator. Their job is to get other people talking. And I want to tell you, this is absolutely bottom line fact. If you, as a small group leader, do not learn something new in your small group each week, you should go home and repent. Because if you don't learn something new, that means you are doing all the talking. Okay? Because if you are letting other people talk, they will have different perspectives than you do. They will see the text differently. They will have different experiences of life journey. So when the text resonates of them, they will experience, because they're in a different space than you are in your life. And God will speak to them. That does not mean there's not truth in those texts. It means that the truth, if you've been in the Bible any length of time and you read Matthew 1 this year and you read it Matthew 1 next year, it's going to say something different to you because you're in a different space in your life and God is always speaking to us. So the number one thing as a small group leader is to get other people involved. That is the challenge. The biggest problem is small group leaders who talk too much. Nobody wants to come and hear you talk over the course of time. I mean, I don't care how interesting you are. If that's really your gift, then you're probably making a living as a seminar speaker somewhere. Okay.
How do you pass the invitation there to form a small?
How do I pass it?
Yeah.
Personally, one at a time at church, and then we do small group sign-ups at church too, because because not everyone knows everyone. We just literally have the sheets out there.
You allow
And people.
everyone to pick their own group.
Yes. Yeah.
So they can, if they feel, whatever they feel comfortable with.
Whatever they feel comfortable. We want them to have easy in, easy out.
But what if the small group is not even a program of the church?
It's okay. You can have your own small group. It's not a problem. You just have to have, you need to have a certain number of people committed to it. My own personal thing is you need at least 4 solid people in order to have a small group. I mean, 4 people who are there. If you have less than 4 people at any given meeting, it just doesn't feel right. Okay, 4 is kind of the minimum number. Now, 40 would be better, but 4 is okay. That's kind of what you need in order to make it work. It doesn't work. And so in order to have 4, you're probably going to need 8 people committed. Because from my experience, people are there about half the time. Just like they're at church about half the time, right? So when
Ruth and I decided to start our small group about 3.5 years ago, we asked some people that we knew we would like to have come.
Right.
And then we just literally got it at the podium.
Yeah.
And made an announcement
Yeah.
for a couple of weeks and put it in the
Yeah.
bulletin, and we got another 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not rocket science in that respect. It's so you choose. What?
But we also did a lot of praying that
Yeah.
God will bring together in that small group the one who want to learn something from Him. And we did a lot of prayer.
Amen.
That on that group, our purpose is just to learn about Him, and He will bring people.
Yeah.
And it's been going on for 4 years.
Amen. But I can assure you that it doesn't matter who God brought, you would still grow in your small group as long as they were committed. And that's what the crazy thing. Now, I was part of a cell church for a few years, and in the cell church, they don't let you choose. They assign you. Each semester, you get assigned to a new small group. And it's difficult because you got attached to all these people. And now the next semester you're assigned, and guess what happens? Do you think they work or not? Yes, they do. Absolutely, they work. Because it doesn't matter who the people are. The agenda is to meet Jesus. He's to meet Jesus. And Jesus is present wherever 2 or 3 people are gathered in His name. Not 2 or 3 people who you like are gathered in His name. Right? I mean, He is present. Now, it's nice to have people that you like to meet together with over the course of time. I mean, I'm not going to deny it. But the fact is that God is not limited. And He is present in a group that comes together to meet and study about Him. He is present. And you'll have the amazing experience in that way of recognizing that you can have just as good a fellowship in Jesus with people who you not like.
I don't think so.
I know you don't, and neither do most people. And that's why I don't push people in, but I'm telling you that you will.
I need to pray more.
No, it's not. It's a matter of going in and just saying, God, I'm open to this. Because the first small group I was a part of, I was not like any of those people. None of them. They all had children. And I was 24, single, just broken up with my girlfriend. I was like as far from having children as possible. Okay, this was not like we're all in this. No, but it's not about that. Really not. It's about meeting Jesus. And if Jesus, it's crazy. We laugh because when we started the church in West LA about 15 years ago, there was all these Koreans, and we became Korean. I mean, I didn't know a lot of Koreans before that time, but over the course of hanging out for a few years, God is amazing. It is. Okay, think easy, not hard. Think ahead, not behind. In other words, it requires some planning. Think full staff, this is for a church, full staff participation, not staff specialists. Okay? Everyone going. And I can assure you that if you try and run a small group program in a church where the senior pastor is not behind you, it will not work. End of story, period. You can have individual small groups, but you will not have a small group program. Okay? Think apprentice, not expert. Okay? We're all learning, and you want learners in there. Think decentralization, not staff control. Give people the ability. They can choose whatever format they want and whatever topic that they want. Okay? To be able to do this. Think leader multiplication, not group multiplication. This is another area that many groups fail. They try and force it to split, right, Randall? Try to get that young and old group to multiply. Oh my goodness, no. Just start another one. You have a great small group, don't break it up in order to make it multiply. It doesn't work. Just start another one. You've already got people who are happy. Now you want to make them unhappy.
Yes.
Does that even make sense? To try and make people unhappy when they're already happy? Oh, we're a church after all, so, okay. All right, so here are some of the specifics. Medium-sized groups increase the odds that casual friendships will develop without the feeling a need to force intimacy. Okay, again. Groups help us form personal relations by providing a safe space within the group where we can make friends who can then become more intimate friends. Okay, here's the 10 to 12 week cycles. Shorter term groups are optimal. For churches, you can't do everything. If you're going to have really strong small groups, you can't be heavily program oriented. Look, I mean, Calvary Chapel, who we rent from there at the place, they have enormous Wednesday night service. I mean, huge midweek service. They have more people there on Wednesday night than we have on Sabbath morning there in their service. But they don't have small groups because you can't. People are not going to come to a weekly small group and then go on Wednesday night to a meeting where they're going to. And frankly, I would much rather have people in a small group because they're in community together. They're forming friendships and relationships together. Those people on Wednesday night, it's great. They're in the Word, but they're not connected with one another. Multiply groups by identifying leaders. Okay, this is the whole thing. Okay, pinpoint the most convenient locations. Again, choose locations. These are just some of the practical things for churches if you want to try and get into a small group thing there.
What do you mean by, I kind of know what you mean by, I just want to know.
Which one?
Less overwhelming time commitment, what do you mean by that?
Well, again, we want to make it as easy as possible for people to do a small group. Okay, we want to keep down the preparation time, but we also don't want to be inviting them to come to the small group and come to small group and Vespers, come to small group and come to this, come to small group and this. Okay, because it does. I mean, people are busy. If you want people to really be in a small group, you need to make that the highest priority. If you want them to come to something else, then do something else. And is the and you know what and is like.
But that answered my question. The length of time the group is together.
The length of time, well, that depends on the group. That depends on life space. Look, our small group, we meet at 6 on Friday nights. We have dinner from 6 to 7. We have small group time from 7:15 to 8:15, and we're done. Now, the young adult small groups, some of them don't start until 8 o'clock at night. Okay, I've been in small groups that didn't finish till 10, 11 o'clock at night, and that's okay because those people are in that life space. Layla's small group is famous, right, for ending late, right, because they're Brazilian, okay? That's okay. They don't even wake up till 10 at night, right? All right? And so that's okay. It's not about that. It's about being, A, having people who have a similar purpose, and B, about being aware. Okay, in our small group, we have a lot of young families. These people do not want to be up late on Friday night. If they're up late on Friday night, they are never coming to church on Saturday morning. I can tell you that. Okay, so if I want them to, and I'm just very time conscious. For me, I don't like being stuck in a place that's going to go on and on and on and on and on forever. Okay, and that's just kind of up to the leader to be able to keep that agenda. That's why I'm really, really very focused on this. And I want to say, you know, within the actual small group time, it's very easy to get sidetracked. And that is part of the leader's responsibility, is to be able to bring people back. That's just part of the art form of being a small group leader, is being able to take what people have done and say, thank you very much, we need to keep moving. I mean, it's just, that's the bottom line.
How you said about the topics, how do you choose your topic? Just one?
Well, if you've never done a small group before, I would suggest getting a small group manual or an outline. There's some wonderful, I mean, if you go to a Christian bookstore, there's hundreds of them. Just pick a topic that you like. If you've never done one before, I suggest choosing one of the Gospels. Take Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John and start and use an outline from that. Don't pick too big a passage, you know. Whatever you can read comfortably, 10 to 15 verses, you know.
Simple and relatable.
Simple and relatable. You want people to be able to it's far more important that they take something small and apply it than they have this depth of knowledge and don't do anything with it.
So it's not really like a real Bible study.
It's a Bible study. I mean, you look, we're looking at Leviticus 2. That's a Bible study. I mean, Leviticus 2 is a Bible study. But It's more important that they be able to take a chunk of it and apply it than it is that they grow in the knowledge of what that verse says. Because it doesn't matter how much they know about that passage if they're not putting it into practice in their life. I don't care. It's like you don't want to be around those people.
How do you deal with a group that has varying Christian experience?
Well, that's what you want. You want people with varying Christian experience. The main thing is that you don't let one person dominate. That's the main thing. That is the leader's job, is to spread out the responsibility. And part of the reason that I actually structure these groups like I was telling you is to keep that from happening. Okay, if you have different groups and they're all talking and then you come back together and you go dun, 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 you come around the circle, everyone's participating. What kills groups is one person who's talking all the time. Nobody wants to be there. They don't care if it's a leader or somebody else. Your job as the leader is to make sure that doesn't happen. But we talk about that. If that's a problem, you need to set the group expectation, and then if it's really a problem, it keeps going. You have to go and talk to the person. That's your responsibility as a leader. Okay. Now I tell people it is very easy to be a small group leader. Okay. And there's actually 2 different job descriptions, and they don't need to overlap. They can totally be different people. The small group leader is the primary point person for any small group. They are the ones who set the times together. They are the ones who call the people, they email the people. If you're going to have food together, they set it together. They talk about when you're going to do it. They are the leader. Okay? They are the most important person. Then you also need a teacher or facilitator for your small group. Someone who's actually going to facilitate that small group time. It can be the same person, but it does not need to be. Sometimes different people have different gifts. When I went to Norwalk Church as a small group pastor, all these women said, we can't lead small groups. Oh, yes, you can. They're like, there's no way we can lead a small group. Yes, you can. And some of them committed to trying it. Within a month, they were so excited because they found that they could be the leader. They could organize, they could call everyone, they could email people. They were the one touching base with everyone. And they're the leader. Because the facilitator, that's all they're connected with is that 1 hour. That's their job. That's just part of the job. But the leader they're the hub around which the small group will focus and will come to. Sometimes they overlap, but they don't have to. They can be completely different people. And the funny thing was that within about 6 months, a lot of these ladies a bunch of them were like 50s and 60s, they've been in church a long time, some of these women, they were actually leading the small group discussion. They never thought they would do that. But once they got the hang of being the leader, of just inviting people, they realized, oh, we could do that better than this other person. Because really the job of the facilitator is to get people talking. You do not have to have all the answers. Now, it is helpful to know the passage. I'm not going to deny it. Okay? It is helpful to have a knowledge of this passage. But it's helpful to have a knowledge of the passage because it's a lot easier to get people talking if you know the passage than if you don't. Really, the best small group leaders, they get the responses coming back, they summarize and ask the next question. That's what an effective small group leader does. You tell me, you tell me, you tell me, you tell me, you tell me. And what I say is, what I'm hearing is that this is the sacrifice is really not having anything to do with death. It really is about giving ourselves to God. So what do you think about, let me go for the next question. Those are the best small group leaders. You can synthesize what's come out and being able to point the group in the next direction. Now, having said that, there are absolutely times in a small group when you should have no agenda because there's a person who is in need. Okay? Absolutely. If they are in need, that small group, that's what your small group is about that night. I mean, you're not going to sit there with someone who's dying, in pain, serious pain, and spend your whole small group. But if I have to do that 2 weeks in a row, I'm not going to do it with that person. Okay? I'm not. I'm going to tell them, let's talk about this outside the small group. Okay? We're going to get a group of people, we're going to come, we're going to pray over you, we're going to minister to you, but I want this to become the agenda of the small group. And I want to tell you one thing too, that you cannot have more than one needy person in your small group. And you know what I mean. If there is one person who is bleeding, and this is the word that we use, bleeding over the small group, sharing every week, you can live with one, okay? You cannot live with two, okay? One person is a ministry. The group has a cause. We can minister. We can help this person for a while. Two, there's nobody left to help the people. You're just done, all right? So you have to be careful about who you have, unless that is your focus of your small group. If our group is to deal with this particular ministry, okay, now we've got this is our agenda. We're going to deal with, Yeah, I mean, couples who have gone through a divorce or going through a divorce, fine, that's your ministry. We understand this is what everyone's doing. But otherwise, if it's a small group Bible study fellowship, it is not going to survive. And I don't want to be mean about it. I just know that you just don't survive it. You don't. You have to have healthy people ministering to the unhealthy. Yes, absolutely. Yes. And so that's why we were asking before if there's different people at different stages of the small group. You need different people at stages of the small group because the people who have had this experience can minister to the other people, can minister to the other people, and then it comes around. That's what happens in our spiritual journey. We're all in different places that we minister. I mean, if I didn't have the kids in my small group who are very inexperienced and immature, it would be different. I would miss that level of enthusiasm because kids get joyful about learning the Bible a way that people who've been doing it for 40 years don't. Sorry, right? They don't. They get enthusiastic. They're excited about something new. New believers, man, it's great to have new believers in your small group. If they're all new believers, well, start a new believer study because it's not going to work in a traditional format. But you want different people from different places. We only have a few minutes left, so let me just take any questions here, Phil.
Yeah, you may have addressed this and it went over my head. I'm not sure. You talk about several groups presently studying a particular topic like Leviticus or something. So who's preparing the materials?
I am.
You do?
Mm-hmm. I prepare and I send it out. That's what those at the very end of your packet there. That's what those are. That's what I send to the small group leaders. Now they still have to prepare and teach.
Are you the facilitator?
Group. No, I don't do any of it. No, I'm only leading my one small group. Other people are leading their small group. So I just send them kind of the questions to help them do it. There's a lot of books you can buy that have the same things in it. I just kind of have my format the way I like and have found works.
You also
in
have
those
other groups though that have their own topic.
Yes, there's other groups that have their own topic. Randall, yeah, they do their own. Yeah, they do their own. And that's part of the commitment.
I was going to say about leaders and all that, too, is that, like, I've had periods in our young adult ministry where I've had, like, 3 small groups going, and they all have leaders, and they all have had facilitators. Maybe 2 or 3 people in that group, they're all friends, they're able to facilitate their own discussion. I'm in a season right now where we're doing one kind of young adult bigger group, and I'm a facilitator, and they kind of organize and stuff, and I help them sometimes. So there's seasons where you have a lot of maybe capable, available leaders, facilitators who are able to teach and all that, and there's seasons where you don't. Like I had 2 people that they moved away, and so now I didn't have someone that could teach. But when you said about, you always have someone that can organize the group. So even if I, as a young adult pastor, facilitate 2 small groups a week, well, if I'm only teaching them, all I gotta do is go to that group, that 1 hour. If they're organizing all of it,
the leader is the one that matters. If a group has a leader, and anybody can be a leader. Any of you can lead a small group. Anybody can lead a small group. If that's what the passion of God has put on your heart. It's not a difficult thing. And Randall can tell you because my staff there at the place, they've grown tired of me and my lists. But I'm like, this is not crazy, this is not hard. You just have to keep calling the people. You do. You have to keep reaching out and reach out and reach out and reach out and reach out. But the amazing blessing, like Layla was talking about, is that the small group leader is the one who's the most blessed because you are the one who gets all these relationships in your life. You're the one who's most connected with all these people. And so you get the blessing of these relationships, whereas the others, they see each other, but they're not connected in the way you are as the leader with them because you're talking to them every week. And you're having that experience with them every week. Any other questions about this? I know there's a lot of stuff to kind of throw into 1 hour here. I've learned tons and tons and tons. I figured somewhere along the way I've led about, about 1,500 small groups over the course of the last 20-some years. And you do learn a few things along the way. We've got some of the lists in the back there, just some of the small groups that we currently have, the sign-up sheet that we have, some of the outlines that we use in order to invite people to help them facilitate and to be actually able to lead these small groups and bring people into them to recognize what will work for them or what won't work for them, and that's part of the challenge of the small group leader. Yeah.
Is it your format, how you like it? Is there a particular book or thing where you got?
I learned all of this stuff that I use for the actual small group time from the Cell Church movement. The Cell Church movement has all kinds of material out there. I was part of a Cell Church for about 3 years. They are very specific in Cell Churches about about format of the small groups, because there's so many. I mean, every single person in the cell church is part of a small group, so they have to have leaders. So they do all this training. And so Ralph Neighbor he's written a bunch of this stuff about small groups and how they lead. The other one, what's it called? It's just like your neighbor. Yeah, Ralph Neighbor. He writes all this. They've got a stack of material on the 4 W's that I talked about earlier, and how to use these questions to be able to lead an effective small group, because they've just done this thousands and thousands of times. So they have the other book that I mentioned here at the beginning was Randall, what was the name? Activate. That book kind of sets the outline for a church, for a bigger picture of how to do a small group ministry within a church, kind of all the ins and outs of a small group ministry. If you were interested in adventure group, which I said I would talk more about, that book is fly fishing, dog walking, and sharing Christ in the 21st century. So that book is out. That's what I still use. We just finished a series on it now. About every 2 or 3 years, I'll go through for a 10-week series through that book, training new adventure group leaders about how to do adventure groups. It's not very complicated at all, and anyone can do it. And in fact, it's easier than a small group, because you don't have all the extra stuff. You're basically just inviting people and then doing something you like. I'm trying to pass off my tennis group. I started playing tennis with a bunch of the guys too. We started doing that, and I'm going to get one of them. They don't know who it is yet, but one of them is going to end up taking leadership of that. Trying to do that on a bi-weekly basis. It's what we have had them in the past. Caleb actually led one for a while, but we haven't had one. We don't have one now. But those would be a great group to be able to start. In fact, when I was at Life Drive, one of the members had a running group, and he had huge amount of people. He was more well connected than anyone else in that church. He had a marathon clinic that he would run every year. Train people for a marathon. They had hundreds of people coming out, and most of them were not connected to church at all. And that's why I say, when you're talking about small groups being evangelistic, again, the problem with them being evangelistic is if you have any goal other than to meet Jesus, you're going to be in trouble in that small group. Okay? Unless you have an adventure group that's specifically oriented to, hey, let's go and this group we're intended to meet our neighbors, but I still think the best way to do it is to pick something you like running or cooking or tennis, which is me, soccer, we've done the indoor soccer and the kids soccer, those kinds of things, just ways that you can you just invite people, because you're already passionate about them. You're really thinking, what am I passionate about? What do I already like to do? What would be absolutely no burden? Believe me, if I played tennis every day, it would not be a burden to me. Okay, I don't have time, but it would not bother me. I would be excited about doing it. So for me to go and play and invite people to come and play, yeah, it's not a problem, right? I'll go out there anytime. I'm sure. Hey, let's go play tennis. So what you want is something that you're going to be excited about doing.
So that's evangelism. That's evangelism. I mean, that's how evangelism happens.
It is. And you probably know. I mean, I just read the latest research, Barnes research this last week about it. People are becoming less and less receptive to going to church. Less and less receptive. But they are not less and less receptive to doing stuff. They want community. They want to be connected to people. They just are not sure about church. It's not even that they're opposed to church anymore. It's just not. Okay, last one here.
How do you interject Jesus in your adventure?
You don't need to interject Jesus if you're a Christian, right? If you're a Christian, you just talk about your life. Because my life is a life that revolves around Jesus, right? So I don't have to, the problem is I just don't have to pretend. Because a lot of times Christians, they're talking to plenty of other people, but they're afraid to actually talk about Jesus.
So you don't talk about Jesus?
Oh, you do. Because you talk about Jesus because I talk about Jesus because I have a relationship with Jesus. I just don't not talk about Jesus, right? That's the thing. It's not that I have to.
It's scary. I mean, sometimes when you say something, it gets kind of a little bit careful or something.
That's what people are afraid of, but it's not true. Let me give you an example. I lived in West Los Angeles for about 15 years. If you ever go to the gym in West Los Angeles, it's quite an adventure because people are into everything. Okay, you start talking to the people. I mean, people, I'm not kidding you, will tell you, you know what, yeah, I've been reading these books about worship, and there's this planet that's out there, this blue planet, and if you go and you do this, And they will tell you like it's a perfectly normal thing. And yet Christians, who have 2 billion people in the world who are Christians, are afraid to talk about Jesus because people might be offended. I'm like, seriously? This is normal compared to where most people think. Okay, this is not weird stuff to believe in Jesus.
Sometimes it's not feeling afraid, it's just how to break the ice. You know, like you met somebody, you just don't want to say, hey, guess what, you know, I'm afraid. It's not like that. It's like breaking the ice and how to start and where to start, you know,
Right.
things like that.
Absolutely. But that's why if you're playing tennis with them, then what are you doing? You're sharing your life with them. I mean, how long, if you're actually talking about your life, will it take for it to come out that you know Jesus? I mean, most of the people that I spend any length of time with, you know, even my hairdressers, they know that I know Jesus, right? Because every time I go, if you sit there for 15 minutes, you're talking about your life, right? Because you're just talking about your life. That's it. It's giving you an excuse to share your life with people. That's it.
We did a real quick evangelistic outreach. We were kind of trying to figure out an evangelistic project with our group, not making it the main focus, but something we could do. And we just all agreed that we took some of the flyers for your dad's seminar here a month ago. And said, why don't each one of us agree to pass out at least one of these to somebody?
Yeah.
And involve a lot of go stand on the street corner.
You know what discouraged me? When I was at the Walk Church, we had faithful people. My goodness. They went every Sabbath afternoon for 3 years in the community, handing out material and evangelism. And in those 3 years, do you know how many people joined that church from those people doing it every week? And I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying, if you're going to spend your time doing something, spend it with some people who you can start sharing your life with, because you're far more likely, if you're sharing your life with someone, they're going to ask you about Jesus than some random person. I mean, they are. This is just an excuse. It's an excuse to get to know people. That's literally what it is. It's an excuse to get to know people, and at the same time, you're doing something that you like. So it's not costing me. You know, it's like it's something I want to do anyways. All right. Larry's already been pointing at his clock back there and walked off, so it's 10 after. So let me pray over you guys. If you want to talk to me more, you just come and talk. Heavenly Father, we just pray that your Spirit would bless us. And Lord, I know that you love these communities, and I know the evil one hates them, God, but I know that you've called us to live together in community, and I invite you to bless and put this call on each person who's here today, that they can be a facilitator for you, Jesus, and make a difference in other people's lives and be blessed themselves as we grow in community with you and with one another. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.